Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer. Today we're here for yet another Civilization 6 Wonder Spotlight, where today we are taking a look at the Temple of Artemis. So the Temple of Artemis is unlocked with the archery technology, which does make it an ancient era wonder. The fact that it's an ancient era wonder really only matters for two things, and one of them is the policy cards that boost your production towards ancient and classical era wonders, so that will apply to the Temple of Artemis, but also it does affect the amount of tourism that the Temple of Artemis will produce. So as I talked about in a separate video, I don't even remember which one, all wonders will provide +2 tourism whenever they are constructed, and then they will provide an additional +1 tourism for every era that you still have them after that. So in the late game, in the information era, all of your ancient era wonders will provide the maximum amount of tourism that you can get from a wonder at +9, I believe. As far as unlocking with archery is concerned, this does make it so that the Temple of Artemis is available very early on. All you have to do is go through animal husbandry and then you can research archery. Archery is a fairly easy technology to boost. All you have to do is kill a unit with a slinger, which normally can happen just kind of naturally, considering the amount of barbarians that will probably be around. So if you just go ahead and get a slinger in a city, you can just wait for the barbarians to attack that city, and then you can use the slinger to mop up, or you could just send the slinger out to go kill a barb scout or something of the sort. So it is fairly easy to rush the Temple of Artemis, but I don't always think that this is a good choice for a reason that we will talk about right now. So for the building requirements for the Temple of Artemis, really the only one that you have is that it must be built adjacent to a camp. So this does mean that you have to have the tile improvement placed on the resource that actually is the camp, but once you have that down, then you will be able to construct the Temple of Artemis. So camps go on things such as truffles, on deer, on ivory. I think that might be all of them. There might be one or two more that I'm missing, but I believe that those are the resources that you can build camps on. So be looking out for those if you're going to go for the Temple of Artemis. But out of all the wonders we've covered so far, which are only two other ones, the Temple of Artemis is definitely the hardest to build because I find that a lot of the times I don't necessarily have that requirement satisfied of having a spot for a camp. The fact that you also do have to have the camp itself placed down makes this a little bit more difficult because it means not only do you have to get to archery, but you also have to construct a builder as well. So you have to put in some production towards a builder to then place down the camp on the tile, and then you're able to construct the Temple of Artemis. As far as production cost for the Temple of Artemis goes, it is tied with the other two wonders we've covered so far for the lowest production cost in the game at 180 production, which even though that is the lowest in the game, it is still fairly reasonable considering the time frame in which you unlock the Temple of Artemis. So once you construct the Temple of Artemis, as far as its benefits are concerned, it will provide +4 food to the city that it is constructed in. It will provide +3 housing to that city as well, and it will provide +1 amenity from each camp, pasture, and plantation within 4 tiles of Temple of Artemis. And I do believe that these amenities are applied only to the city that the temple is built in. I don't believe they spread around to your other cities, because I believe that that's only a thing that happens with luxury resources. So nonetheless, though, these are really, really strong bonuses. +4 food is very good. It means that you're going to be able to grow early on extremely fast. You're going to be able to get a much higher population than a lot of other people will, because in the early game, +4 food is effectively 2 extra farms, because actually it might even be 4 extra farms. I can't remember exactly if early game farms provide +1 food or +2. But either way, you're going to be getting effectively either 2 or 4 farms for free for that, and you're going to get the housing space to back it up as well, which is going to allow you to grow even taller in the early game. So this gives you a very big boost in the amount of expansiveness you can have in your capital, which is presumably where you would build this in the early game, and it just allows you to grow that city very tall very early on. Not to mention, you will be getting the +1 amenity from each camp, pasture, and plantation within 4 tiles, which does make it even easier to support that population because you're going to have the amenities to support it. In addition to this, just having those extra amenities means that your amenities from your luxury resources can be distributed elsewhere, because if they're not going to be needed in the city that you build Temple of Artemis, that means that they're going to go to the cities that need them instead. So this can help keep your citizens happy, which will then produce more yields as well. So overall for the Temple of Artemis, it is a little bit trickier to place down than some of the other early game wonders, but it definitely has some of the best bonuses out of all the early game wonders. And now it is that time to give the Temple of Artemis its ratings. So what we do is we give each of the wonders a rating in each for their helpfulness towards each of the 4 victory types. So those ratings just kind of gauge how effective it is to build the wonder given your desired victory condition. The guidelines for this are listed on the right hand of the screen. I also give a difficulty and a consistency rating, both of which are also rated on the 1 to 5 scale, in which 5 is just the most difficult or most consistent, and 1 is the least difficult or least consistent. It should be noted that for the difficulty rating, I assume that we are playing on deity, because that is, after all, what these guides are geared towards, so just take that into account whenever I talk about the difficulty of constructing the wonder. So without further ado, though, let's go ahead and rate the Temple of Artemis. So Domination is up first, and I think that the Temple of Artemis deserves a 2 for Domination. It definitely has some things to help it out, but at the same time, the bonuses that it provides are not all that great for Domination, and I will explain why. So for one, just the nature of it being an early game wonder means that if you're going to go for the Temple of Artemis, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of unit production early on, which is going to mean that you're not going to be able to get that early expansiveness, you're not going to be able to go for an early war as reliably, and thus you're going to lose the chance to snowball a bit. So that is something that sucks. It's definitely a reason to not go for an early game wonder whenever you're playing Domination, and that's just kind of the nature of Domination, in that early time to expand and start to get the ball rolling towards a Domination victory is very important, so you just generally don't have the time to go for a early game wonder. The amenities can be helpful, though, especially if you're going to have to deal with war weariness, so that is the reason I'm not going to give it a 1, because the amenities definitely can be helpful towards keeping your people happy if you ever have to combat war weariness, which you most certainly will if you're going to be playing a Domination game. But overall, I think that the Temple of Artemis is only mildly beneficial towards a Domination victory type, so in most cases, I would probably not advise building it for Domination reasons. Science is up next, and I think that the Temple of Artemis deserves a 3 in science. It is a fairly decent science wonder. So there are a number of reasons that can contribute to this. So for one, whenever you're playing whenever you're playing science, obviously you do have a little bit more space to move around in the early game to change up what you're building. You don't necessarily have to build units or have to build any particular districts. So you do have the necessary resources in most science games to go for the Temple of Artemis. The +4 food and the +3 housing will be very nice for your capital because it will allow you to grow more, which will then in turn provide more science yields because each citizen will produce a bit of science, and the extra housing will allow you to just grow even taller in the future. Also, in having more citizens, you will get more population, which makes it easier to place more districts, to place down or to get buildings in your districts, and thus produce science yield as well. Also, the extra amenities will keep your citizens happy, and as we talked about in the amenities in-depth video, keeping your citizens happy is very, very good because you get a percentage-based yield bonus whenever your citizens are happy. So this can be very nice towards increasing your science yield, and thus just kind of pushing you further ahead in the science game. So I find that most times that I build Temple of Artemis, I am probably aiming for a science victory as my victory condition, so I do think that the Temple of Artemis is fairly decent for science victories. Culture's up next, and I think that the Temple of Artemis deserves a 2. It functions kind of similarly to how it would with science, except I just don't think it's quite as good, simply because you don't really benefit as much from population whenever you're playing for a culture game. So the extra yields that you get towards culture are definitely nice from having more citizens, and likewise the slight bit of extra production that you get also can be nice towards building wonders, but that's a lot less reliable if you're going to use it for building wonders than something as, say, building districts or building yield buildings. It does provide tourism as well, which is a little bit nice, but in the end, +9 tourism is not really all that great, and also every single wonder in the game is going to provide tourism, so you can't really use that as a justification for every single wonder to make it a good culture wonder. But if you do have extra resources in the early game, I would probably still advise going for the Temple of Artemis because keeping your citizens happy can still be very nice for culture games. It will increase your culture output, which can push you through the civic tree. Of course, though, this doesn't directly relate to a culture victory because in the end, it's not really culture that matters for culture victory, but rather tourism. But even so, though, I think that the Temple of Artemis still can be a good get if you have the resources to do it. So for that reason, I think it deserves the 2. Religion is last, and I think that the Temple of Artemis deserves a 1 for religion, simply just because of the nature of it being an early game wonder, and the fact that population doesn't really contribute anything at all towards religion games for the most part, just because, well, outside of like the little bit of extra faith yield that you'll get from having higher population in one city. So in the early game for religion, your main goal is really just to get your great profit, to start generating some faith per turn, and spread your religion and kind of establish it within your own empire, and if you can, immediately spread it to the nearest people to you. So really, when you're playing a religious game, you don't really have the resources early on to be able to go for a wonder, outside of Stonehenge, of course, and even so, I'm not a huge fan of that one. But just because of just because you're not really going to have the resources to do that, I would pretty much always avoid Temple of Artemis if you are going for a religious victory, because your profit and your early religion spread are much more important. As for the difficulty rating, I think it deserves a 4. It is an early game wonder, which makes it very difficult just because of how far ahead the AI starts on Deity. But I think it is slightly easier to get than some of the other wonders, simply because of the fact that it does have to be placed near a camp. And although this would make it sound like it's harder to build, it actually makes it so that the AI are less likely to take it, because a lot of the times the AI won't have a valid spot to put it, and thus they just won't build it. So if you are able to construct the Temple of Artemis, then there is actually a fairly decent chance that you'll be able to get it, because there are some games where it goes for, like, up until the medieval era with nobody building it just because the AI doesn't have a spot to put it. So it is slightly easier than some of the other early game wonders, but still fairly difficult. And for its consistency rating, I think it deserves a 3. It is one of the more inconsistent wonders. So the good thing about it is that you are going to be getting that +4 food and +3 housing every time, which is definitely nice. But for one, you do have to have the necessary camp in order to place it down, which you're definitely not going to be consistently getting in every single game. And also, you need to have plantations, pastures, and camps around the Temple of Artemis to really benefit from its bonus amenities as well. So that's another thing that's not going to happen in every game. So in some games, maybe you'll get 2 extra amenities, and in some games, maybe you'll get 6. It varies a lot, and it is something that just makes the Temple of Artemis a little bit inconsistent. So thank you everyone for watching. I have been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.